All right, so the Winds of Change officially decided to sweep through the Windy City. Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy officially being fired. Pace after 7 seasons on the job. Matt Nagy 4 years in. And fun fact, both of them only had one winning season with the Bears, which was 2018, which was arguably the best season the Bears have had in the last like decade or so outside of the 2010 season. But what's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd, Koshal, and Max Smith here. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Be sure to follow myself and Max on social media as well at Max Smith ESM and at Usayd Koshal. So Max, it's over the Pace Nagy era. How you doing though?
I'm good. Yeah, we have some interesting content that we're going to put out here pretty soon. I mean, it's a really exciting time, I guess, something to finally look forward to as a Bears fan because we didn't really get much this year, unfortunately. But I'm doing well. How are you? Traveling internationally. Glad you're back. Glad you're safe. Do you have a good past 2 weeks? How are your holidays?
Yeah, everything was good. So I get back, I think, on Friday morning, and then it's like Bears game on Sunday, and then Monday morning, it's like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. And, everyone I think was just waiting for some sort of news to drop. The reason being is 'cause everyone knew it was going to happen with Matt Nagy, but it was more so just can it drop already so we know it's official? Because the Bears did this last year where they kind of dragged everything out and waited till like Tuesday or Wednesday to drop the news. Because again, it's the Bears and they're always going to be behind everyone else. But yeah, man, what are your thoughts? I say, let's get into it because you have to talk about Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy being fired. And I think Pace is certainly the more interesting of the two names here.
Yeah, I think Ryan Pace is almost a controversial take here. There's going to be some controversies. What I'm trying to say within the Bears community here, there are a good amount of Bears fans that don't have that many negative feelings towards Ryan Pace. It's really hard to look at his track record and player acquisition and talent scouting, all that jazz. The football side of being a general manager and kind of be upset at what he did. Of course, we can bring up the lack of draft capital, the bad salary cap situation that he's put us in. But one has to take note of the amount of talent that has been locally sourced through draft, through the undrafted free agency, through late round draft picks under Ryan Pace's regime as general manager for the Chicago Bears. So almost at this point, every single favorite of our favorite Bears fans are Ryan Pace's players. And that even goes back to pre-Matt Nagy showing up after the, I guess, John Fox era. But there's definitely some real good reasons to let Ryan Pace go. I highly doubt he doesn't find a job somewhere within a month in the NFL. He's a really respected name. He's a fantastic player and talent evaluator. He definitely has a nose for football. There are a lot of fans, me included, that were even considering, the concept of Ryan Pace as VP of football operations, giving him more of the day-to-day player side, identifying talent with the scouting team, player relations, all that jazz. So there's a lot to be said on the business aspect, right? And this is a little startling because I'm going to bring in the potential new stadium development that was announced over the summer and the early season, that you're getting rid of your general manager, who also plays an integral business role in your organization / company, because at the end of the day, these are private companies. And you're saying bye-bye essentially to your president of your company. And now you need to find a new president while you're in the midst of potentially building a $100 million building to house the future of your franchise for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So this is really an interesting decision for the Bears. And also I want to say it's interesting because the Bears are now in an interesting situation where they no longer have a head coach or a general manager. That is a relatively bad thing to have. We're going to hop into the attractive positions here and why the Bears have one of the more attractive positions, at least in my opinion. But before I finish, I just want to say this really quickly. Head coaches typically aren't going to sign with an organization unless they know who their boss is going to be, right? It's really hard to apply for a job, interview for a job, and not know who your boss is going to be at the end of the day, because that's kind of important. You're working with them day to day, right? So for the Bears priority list, it's going to have to be GM first, head coach second. And as we're seeing reports starting to trickle out from the national media, it looks like the Bears are doing just that, prioritizing the general manager position first, because the Ryan Pace news was a bit of a shock and a stun, a stock. But what do you think?
Well, I want to talk first about the Ryan Pace news because you brought it up. And it's interesting because this report kind of goes back all the way to the 2020 season when Michael Lombardi broke the news that, hey, Ryan Pace is like a son to the Bears organization. So there's a justification for keeping him around. And essentially what had happened is I still think that that was the case in 2021 going into 2022 here. And I'm going to expand on that by saying that when you look at Ryan Pace, I mean, he basically, we have to understand something, is he's the reason the Bears are in this situation they're in right now, both the good situation as well as the bad situation. When you ultimately look at it, I think that Ryan was finally getting to a point where he started to really build the Bears into a team that was going to have success, right? We saw the first couple of years how it was kind of the defense that led the way. And then all of a sudden, the last couple seasons, what has it been? It's been this offensive talent that he's drafted: Cole Kmet, Darnell Mooney, Justin Fields, Tevin Jenkins, Larry Borum, Khalil Herbert. I'll throw David Montgomery into the ring too. That's finally started to show out. And so when you ultimately look at the Bears, I mean, the Pace firing certainly came as a bit of a shocker to me, just because I texted someone this morning. I'm like, wow, I can't believe George fired the golden child, because that's essentially what Ryan Pace was. And switching over to Matt Nagy here, listen, it needed to happen. We all knew it was coming. I think that when you look at this general manager and head coaching duo, we have to understand something, is that I was one of the people that was on Fireside Bears over the summer, both on the YouTube channel as well as the podcast, kind of talking about how I view, and I talked to people in the Chicago media, by the way, beat writers, TV personalities. They all said the same thing. There was a divide between the national media as well as the Bears media in terms of exactly what the futures of Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy look like going into the 2021 season and well beyond. Now, when they signed Andy Dalton, it was kind of, okay, this is just going to be a 1 year thing. That's going to be the end of it. When the Bears were able to draft Justin Fields, it was more so, oh my God, there's a legitimate chance that Justin Fields has brought Nagy and Pace 2 seasons. Now, I think what really changed is that the reason both are out after just 1 year is because 1 year of Justin Fields, I should say, is certainly because Bill Polian finally realized and George McCaskey realized, hey, sometimes you have to make the hardest decisions for the right reasons. And so moving on from Pace and Nagy was, especially Pace, by the way, was something that George never really wanted to do. But essentially, he was told, hey, if you want to deliver a championship before your mom passes away, who she just turned 99 years old, by the way. So happy belated birthday, Virginia McCaskey. You are unfortunately going to have to fire the golden child, Ryan Pace.
Yeah, and you know that's a really tough decision to make from the ownership perspective, from the Bears, at least in the general manager position. Really easy decision to make on the head coaching aspect. um, But at the end of the day, what's going to win this team a championship, correct? There's a lot of tools that Ryan Pace has left for this organization to carry us into the future. He's built a really solid young core of offensive players, right? Kind of scheming away from the historical trajectory of this team with building incredible defenses. Ryan Pace kind of flipped the switch over the past couple of years and really focused on offense, because guess what? He got it. He understood it. The league is a pass-first offense league now. We have to adapt or we die. And what's happened is essentially we're dying because we haven't fully adapted yet. But we have a great young core of players, all of which you just mentioned, and we still have some young defensive studs that you can throw in the mix as well. But what I think is what the organization needs moving forward is something that other teams have been doing for over a decade now, that the Bears have yet to really sink their teeth into, and that's just pure numbers, pure football data analytics. This is something that Halas Hall has kind of like shied away from for a while, and Ryan Pace was supposed to kind of introduce the concept and kind of, you know, modernize. He's the young guy to come in and kind of modernize an old boy, you know, locker room. It didn't really happen. That might be some resistance from ownership. But the report that literally we're just reading right now, right before we started recording this, is the report that the Bears have requested to interview Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Apologies if I mispronounced that. He's a current player football vice president of operations at the Cleveland Browns, and he served as director of football research and development with the 49ers before he took the job with Cleveland. So he has an analytical player acquisition or player talent background, sort of similar to what Ryan Pace had. Noticeably is a lack of business acumen, which is an interesting development. They're leaning really heavily into player analytics, data analytics, football research. Like this, if this is a good sign for the Bears moving forward, I think that they're willing to bring in guys who are going to use the tools that we have already to their best, possible advantages, while also looking out for new potential, home runs. That maybe Ryan Pace was just lucky, I guess. Maybe he was just really lucky at the draft, whereas future potential GMs will actually do their homework.
Right. And, kind of going back to Ryan Pace and modernizing the organization, something big that you need to keep in mind, and I think just goes for everybody here, is the fact that when you look at, let me put it this way, the next general manager that's going to come in is going to have a significantly easier path to walk into, because the reality of the situation is that the path Ryan Pace had to take when he got to Chicago in 2015 was essentially, hey, you've only got what, 2 or 3 building blocks on this team. It was Kyle Fuller, Kyle Long, and Alshon Jeffrey. That's it. And what had happened is that he basically rebuilt the Bears up from scratch. Did the results show for only 1 year? Yeah. But also, I think another thing you can't deny is the Bears players always battled hard for John Fox as well as Matt Nagy. But the reason I bring this up is because whoever the next general manager is going to be, that general manager is not going to have to undergo a full scale rebuild. Which this kind of feeds into our next topic, which is just how attractive are the Bears openings. I think that there's a few teams around the league that already have a quarterback of the place or quarterback. There's a few teams around the league that have a quarterback of the future in place. There's only a handful of teams around the league that do have pieces like Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet and David Montgomery, Khalil Herbert to build around, two offensive tackles with high upside, and then on the defensive side of the ball, you have 2 really good pass rushers as well as Roquan Smith and Jalen Johnson. And so the point is that the Bears head coaching openings, right? They're not just attractive, as well as the GM openings. These are just positions that are not just super attractive because we're talking about a charter franchise in the NFL. These positions are attractive because whoever comes in is going to have a lot of the groundwork laid. And you know what? You can be happy today that Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are gone. That's fine. But should also be thankful because it wasn't for them. You know what? Justin Fields would not be in Chicago right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like that's incredibly important to recognize as a Bears fan is you can be really kind of emotional in the moment right now, but kind of looking back at some of the good things that both of these guys are able to do for the organization. Matt Nagy kind of at least attempted to bring offense first to Chicago Bears along with Ryan Pace. It didn't work out as well as maybe we thought it would, but guess what? There's a young core of solid guys that can translate to future success, like we said, with the new GM. And if we're talking about attractiveness in these positions, the only other team right now, which was also kind of a left field out of nowhere firing, was Brian Flores and the Miami Dolphins. If we're looking at a team that has comparable young core of good guys, offensive, defensive, in a pretty good medium market, especially in one that's growing as quickly as Miami is, the Dolphins are in an attractive position for head coaches right now. I would be very, very, very remiss to throw them out of any conversations for where head coaches could be going, because you have a lot of the chips that you need. I mean, look at the run that they went on this year. Yeah, they didn't get into the playoffs, but I mean, 7 straight games is no easy feat. And some of the teams that they were doing it against is something that's incredibly impressive. That just speaks to the talent on that roster and to the idea that they bought into the organizational culture in Miami. So that was definitely kind of a shocker, I think, on Black Monday today, as multiple people lost their jobs. you know, some of the other teams, or the Raiders, are obviously attractive because they already have a playoff worthy roster. Now the only downside there is they're not as young as some of, you know, the Chicago Bears or as the Miami Dolphins are, for looking in long-term success. But no, you're completely right. Nobody wants to walk into a door for a job that they're set up to fail automatically, right? That's essentially what Ryan Pace did. And he somehow dug himself out and did a fantastic job in putting us in a situation where we could be competitive. And we were, right, for a year. And then we were mediocre for 2 years, and here we are now. So that obviously shows us that whatever magic he had, he used it to get us out of that hole that we were in. But wrong decisions, wrong turns end up to, you know, dead ends. And unfortunately, I feel like that's what happened as a fan, obviously from the outside perspective. But you're completely right. Whoever's going to be brought in as the new general manager for this organization is going to have quite a bit of help from coaching staff if they decide to keep anybody or bring anyone new on, from players and talent, from a media market that absolutely loves their team. So it's hard to imagine that if the Bears are offering a contract, if every single person, let's say this is happening, every single organization is offering the same contract with the same amount of money, it'd be really hard to say no to Chicago, I feel.
Yeah, and you know, there's something else I think that needs to be kind of said here for these now open GM and head coaching positions is that when you look at kind of what direction the Bears are going to want to go in based off some of the reports that we've already heard. Now, Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were fired around 8:25 a.m. Central Time on Monday, January 10th. We're recording this right around 7:30. So it's been about, 11 hours since they've been fired. And the Bears have already requested to speak to Leslie Frazier. The Bears have already requested to interview Doug Peterson. And so I think that these openings are certainly attractive, but how attractive do the Bears want to make them? Because when you are speaking to some of these prospective candidates, something you need to keep in mind is that what control are you going to give? Are you going to kind of shake things up and say, hey, you know what? I know that in the past we've given the general manager full control of football operations. It's kind of been the head coach, which has been like a supplementary piece there. But then if you do manage to hire a big name head coach, doesn't have to be Jim Harbaugh, can be someone that's proven and won a championship. Take, for example, Doug Peterson. Then do you look at him and say, hey, you've built something? Well, you did great. You got the best out of Nick Foles as well as had Carson Wentz playing at a high level. So, hey, we're going to give you a bit more autonomy than we're used to. And especially with the new kind of organizational shakeup, quote unquote, that George McCaskey just instilled, which is that the general manager now reports directly to the chairman, which is George McCaskey, rather than Ted Phillips. It's certainly something you could see, okay? Because maybe George McCaskey is going to realize, hey, if this guy's reporting directly to me now, I'm going to raise my standards and expectations, but I am also going to go ahead and ensure that the head coach gets a bit more autonomy and is allowed to a run things his way a bit more than I've given other head coaches control in the past. Oh, and side note, by the way, um, I do think that the extent of the Bears kind of front office shakeup that everyone was talking about, like president of football operations and moving Ted Phillips to the business side, I think that was the front office shakeup that everyone was seemingly talking about and that was rumored to happen is that one, Ted Phillips stays in his role as CEO, but he foresees or continues to oversee Arlington Heights. And then what happens is the head coach and GM now report directly to George McCaskey. I think that was the extent of the front office shakeup.
Yeah, which, you know, isn't terrible at the end of the day. A lot of people don't like Ted Phillips. There's a lot of players who don't like Ted Phillips. There's a lot of issues around Ted Phillips. And you know, say what you want. I guess from a player's perspective, the results haven't really been there. But I guess from a business perspective, Bears are still making money and are still one of the most valuable brands in the country. So you can't knock them for that. But you know, like I guess let's circle back a bit to some of the names that we listed and what that kind of sends out as a message. Because every time that we request to interview certain coaches and it makes news, that's telling other coaches in the hiring pool maybe an idea of what the Bears are looking for. Doug Peterson and Leslie Frazier are two completely different coaches. From just philosophy, what side of the ball they specialize in. Leslie Frazier is a defensive specialist. Doug Peterson is more of an offensive guy. Again, he's from the Andy Reid tree, along with Matt Nagy. They are seemingly friends, which is an interesting development. I thought Doug Peterson might have just rejected the job interview out of solidarity with his friend who just got fired, but maybe not. $7 million, which is what they're paying Matt Nagy, is a lot of money. I wouldn't want to turn that down either. But I would just want to put this out on regards to the feelers towards Jim Harbaugh. Is we learned today that the owner of the Miami Dolphins, Stephen Ross, he, of course, is a major benefactor to the University of Michigan. And Stephen Ross publicly said that he would never hire Jim Harbaugh to be a coach of the Miami Dolphins. He'd rather him stay at Michigan, which is an interesting thing to say. Your priorities are very clear now as an owner of a professional football team. But essentially what he said was Jim Harbaugh reached out to him, and that they're currently undergoing potential contract negotiations. In our coaching carousel episode that we're going to push out in a couple of days as this starts heating up more, I go over Jim Harbaugh's contract, and essentially there is a buyout clause that is dirt cheap, about $1.5 million for an organization to buy out that contract. Like I just said, we were paying Matt Nagy $7 million to coach the Chicago Bears. So comparably, and that's a drop in the bucket compared to $7 million at the end of the day. So if the Bears are really hungry for Jim Harbaugh and they really wanted that to happen, it sounds like Jim Harbaugh is interested in the idea of having it happen, then the opportunity is there. So the only reason that we would never at least speculate that this is a possibility is if a contract extension is signed or he signs with somewhere else. So until that happens, though, it's very fair, and I'd say encouraged to speculate and try to think about what that future looks like.
Yeah, and the future I think is certainly really interesting because, I mean, on one hand, the Bears are not only looking to hire a diverse candidate, or they're going to have a diverse search and range of candidates they're going to be looking at. But when you talk about the future, there's a lot to consider, right? What are you going to look for in the next GM? Are you going to go with someone who has a heavy background in scouting? Are you going to go with someone that's got a heavy background when it comes to finances or analytics? I think that you kind of have to find someone that is a middle ground between all of those, because one of the big knocks on Ryan Pace was that he was a director of player personnel for the Saints, I believe, prior to making the jump to the Bears. And his main job was just scouting and finding talent. It necessarily was never dealing with the financial side of things, which is why his top contract advisor was Joey Lane. And then for Ryan Pace, when it came to making trades and looking at college players, well, guess what? He really relied on Mark Sadowski heavily, the director of college scouting, to be able to make those trades. Now, I do think that one route the Bears could certainly go is looking in-house and saying, hey, Champ Kelly, we want to interview for this job. Now, I bring Champ Kelly up, one, because I think you just should do the right thing and interview him. But also, number two, there would be some level of continuity that a lot of people are not considering to promote from within. What you are basically doing is you're saying, hey, Mark Sadowski, Joey Lane, Champ Kelly, we understand that you guys were all brought up under Ryan Pace and promoted by Ryan Pace, but also at the end of the day, we want to keep you, we want to promote you because we believe that the collaboration that you guys had, there's that fancy term again, the collaboration that you guys had kind of helped the Bears make the right decisions. So this is going to be your show to run now.
Right. Yeah, no, 100%. And there's always an incentive to keep guys in-house because these would be the players that Champ knows, right? That he helped assist in acquiring or helped assist in watching film and writing notes and meeting with those guys and determining who they want to target and how they're going to get them. So he already has some sort of acumen with the players that he would be managing at the end of the day. And that's something that I feel is invaluable for any position. And you know, what we saw with Sean Desai is the Bears could have gone out and essentially got anybody on the market that they wanted to. Now, the market was a little dry at that time, but they decided to go in-house and bring somebody up, which is maybe an indicative flag of what's to come here as we look for a new general manager. There are plenty of opportunities and options to look outwards, but you're completely right. It would be it'd be gross misconduct to not at least look inside and see some of the talent that is currently sitting in Halas Hall that's just waiting for an opportunity to jump up there and make a move.
Yeah, and you know, I think finding the next head coach is going to be interesting because there's certain things you have to look for. I mean, remember when the Bears hired Matt Nagy, it was kind of, oh my God, he is this offensive genius, and we're hiring him because he has this offensive background, because he's coming from what is essentially a modern NFL offense, but he's also got this extensive background in the quarterback position, playing the quarterback position in the Arena Football League, never necessarily taking a rep in the NFL, but then learning under Andy Dalton, playing a pivotal process and a pivotal role in the drafting of Patrick Mahomes. Those are all things that you really have to consider, right? And so, what do you think the Bears should be looking for in a new head coach?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the number one question that we're asking ourselves. And I've thought about this for a while now. I think the Bears need to stay away from trying to find a Sean McVay-esque wonderkin, right? Like, I think that's what we tried to do, which was the direction of the league was let's get these young, inexperienced, but really smart offensive gurus to be head coaches in the NFL and hope that it works, right? Either it's spectacular or it spectacularly fails. There really isn't any middle ground. I guess maybe we found the middle ground since we were mediocre for consistently. So maybe we are the exception to the rule here. But no, I think the Bears need to look at someone that's experienced, that obviously has good rapport with players. I think that the Bears locker room needs a strong culture, something that allows guys a mission to believe in, somebody who has connections throughout the league, somebody who's, because of that experience, knows some really smart guys, some really bright guys, that's able to bring in, hopefully, new general manager. And George McCaskey allows the new head coach to kind of build out their own coaching staff if they need to. I'm fairly sure a lot of Nagy holdovers might be gone by the end of the season. It'd be really weird to bring in a new head coach and a completely, different support staff. So we'll see what happens there. But no, I think, what I'm thinking about looking into a new head coach is a guy who's found success before, who has built successful cultures in his past, who knows what players need, what players want, who knows how to build into a market, right? A guy who's not afraid to be honest with fans, because I think that's incredibly important in Chicago. Is you need a head coach who's going to get up after the games. If you lose, tell us why we lost, right? Don't give us the same answer over and over again. Be honest. Why do you think people love Justin Fields so much after day one? It's because he lost and he told us exactly why he lost and how he's going to make sure we don't do it again. And it works. People love the kid because he's honest, right? It's not that hard, but it is hard to admit that you were wrong. So I think we need to bring in a guy who is incredibly egotistical, but knows how to build a culture, knows what the players want, and can bring in guys. And what I'm last thing, and I'm tripping over my words here, but this is the most important thing, seriously, is a coach who knows when he's wrong, is a coach who knows to say, I don't know, right? That's incredibly important in any position, in any industry across the world. But in professional football, if you don't know what the answer is, you bring somebody in who does. That's what we need from a head coach. We didn't have that over the past couple of years. I'm fairly confident that we didn't have that because we had the same issues over and over again, right? So we need to bring someone in that's the complete antithesis of that, and hopefully we get it.
Right. And, for me, some of this goes down to just knowing a coach that knows the player's strengths and weaknesses. Okay. A coach that is actually going to build a system and a program that's predicated on both on the field and off the field in terms of what exactly is a vision of the coaches, but then also what's going to constitute a successful football team, right? So I think that the big thing right now is everyone's kind of saying, well, we don't care who you hire. Just get us someone that's not Leslie Frazier, number one, but get us someone who knows X's and O's and is going to adapt and is going to adjust. That a lot of that kind of continues into this, just in the sense that there's a lot of off the field stuff too, right? What kind of coach you're going to hire, who's going to establish and set and build a tone? Are you going to look for someone that's a leader of men, or are you going to look for someone that's such a player's coach? I think you do lean towards leader of men just a bit, because the reality of the situation is that Matt Nagy's kind of BU philosophy and was all about like individualism and stuff, and BU, go out there, have fun. All right. Did it keep the team together? Yeah. But at the end of the day, let's just be honest. Leaders of men like Mike Tomlin and Sean Payton are also able to keep the team together through both the good times and bad times. And that's ultimately what matters, right? So for the Bears, they need to bring someone in that's a true leader of men. Okay. And you need to look for that someone that has grown in coaching trees where that philosophy is consistently emphasized.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I'm completely on board with that mission. That's what I'm looking for in these pools of names that are, starting to surface. And there's a short list of guys that are exactly that archetype. And I think that's exactly what this team needs. So, but we're definitely going to hop into that in future episodes. The Hunt at Halas Hall episodes will be coming out throughout the next couple of weeks until we finally have our new GM and our new head coach.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it from us, guys. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at FireSideBears. Be sure you're following myself and Max on Twitter at MaxSmithESM and at Usayd Koshul. Check out our weekly podcast, guys. Episodes drop on Tuesday nights at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. We are going to get out of this thing. We'll see you guys later in the week, where we'll have some more stuff for you. And then going into next week, we'll have more content based on what the Bears do, as well as just a 2021 season recap, where we're going to break it down, hopefully with some special guests. But peace out, guys. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay warm. We'll see you guys later.